What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if the Court of Owls will be defeated at the end of Gotham Knights. Now, I wanted to take this video, and I've had a lot of people tell me, talk about the Court of Owls, because ironically, game heavily focused on them, right? The kind of the whole deal, and I haven't really talked about them all that much. And I felt like, okay, that would be something good to say. And then for the video topic here, it may sound obvious where it's like, well, will the villain be defeated by the end of the game? Well, maybe the obvious answer is yes, but the thing we have to think about is really, this is kind of how I do things, right? Sometimes I take an idea and I completely 180 myself and I go a direction that just nobody would ever think of doing and nobody has ever done. And I think that's kind of what makes me pretty unique. But it does give us an opportunity to talk about the Court of Owls, talk about the role they'll play in this game, and ultimately, again, talk about if they will be defeated at the end of it. So let's start at the ending, okay? And we'll work back to maybe what they could do during the game. I think that it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that the main villain of this game will be defeated. And the reasoning is, well, look at what the Arkham games did. They really, they've had situations where they've eliminated villains like from the board, or they've cleared stuff out, or they've moved situations, right? Even look at, again, Rocksteady versus Warner Bros. Montreal. You got to be careful there, right? But look at Arkham Asylum to Arkham City. Yeah, Joker was defeated, but, a lot of stuff happened to him, and they left it pretty ambiguous of, like, well, what is he going to do? Obviously, there were Easter eggs in the game to kind of show, like, where they were thinking about going with it. You have the serum kind of at the end, where it was either, like, Killer Croc or Scarecrow, whoever that, like, grabbed the box, right, brought underwater. So, you have those things that definitely set up a sequel game, and flat out, Joker, yes, he was defeated, but he was in future games. So, I guess I kind of almost got myself in quite a tight squeeze here with the title, because will the Court of Owls be defeated? I feel like you kind of have to. It's very, and by the way, this is something that's completely, I think, outside of this, but this is something that I would like to see one day. You see sometimes movies, Avengers, right? Infinity War is probably the best example of, like, the villain winning at the end. Even like one of my personal favorite franchises, like Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates 2 ended in not a great place. Pirates 3 ended in a better place, okay? But, you don't see that all that often where, like, the bad guys win, or you're in an established franchise where, like, they're going to win, the bad guys will win, and then the good guys will win later. And games don't really do that, mainly because there's less of a guarantee that you're always going to get a sequel. Maybe they can pivot. You never, you know what I mean? You never know what could happen with the game. So maybe you leave it ambiguous of where a sequel is going, but you kind of have to, for the most part, close out your main game every time, because if you don't, then it's like, well, what if you never got a second one? Then that game just looks stupid, right? There's been some games that have finished the story through DLC, which is one of the more scummy things to do. So I'm not suggesting, by the way, they're going to do that with this game, but the interesting thing is this. Court of Owls are a villain group that not a lot of people know. I think, they're gaining popularity probably by the day, but not a lot of people know about them. And again, there's a difference between YouTube community, comic book community, Twitter community, and the people that buy this game. The game is going to sell 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, maybe 10 plus million units. Trust me, they are not all on YouTube right now watching, right? They don't all know who the Court of Owls are. They may not even know who several, yes, will they know who maybe Mr. Freeze is? Yeah, will they know who Batman is? Obviously. So they'll know some stuff, and they'll not know other things. So that's important to keep in mind. And to kind of continue that off, look, this is a chance to show off a new villain, or a villain, again, that's not fully known by the majority for the first time. Now, we've said, what's the strength, and I've said, what's the strength of Arkham Knight? Well, one of the strengths is all of those side villains they introduced. A lot of people, including myself, by the way, a lot of them I've never heard of. I never experienced them before. You get in, you go through it. Now, it's not so much where they're not steering the story, where it's like you can defeat them, you can get through them, and then you can say, okay, well, I experienced something I've never experienced before. That's cool. Now I know who they are. Now I want them in future games, all that stuff. So you have a chance to build them up. Okay, Court of Owls is almost the same thing. You have a chance here to build them up, but the issue is with a main villain, with the main plot of a game. Okay, now while I don't believe they're going to be because that's an interesting thing. We can kind of, bring that into discussion now. How much will they be in this game? I think they'll be in it quite often, or you'll feel their presence quite often. But if we've learned anything truly, even like literally right after Arkham Asylum, and even Arkham Asylum, I would say almost every single Arkham game, like, yes, there's villains, like Black Mask / Joker is villain in Arkham Origins, Joker's the villain in Arkham Asylum, but City's split. You could argue Hugo Strange is the villain, but you could also argue Joker. You could argue Penguin even. You know what I mean? You could argue it. Arkham Knight, there's the rotating cast, right? Scarecrow, Arkham Knight, even I would say Joker becomes the main villain of that game. But the bottom line is, well, firstly, in all of the games, the main villain is never always the central threat. That's kind of the whole fun of it, is because if they're always the central threat, you'll never have time to do other things. So if the Court of Owls are so overbearing in this game, you'll never have time to deal with Mr. Freeze, okay? And that's just how I think comic book games kind of are, right? Where they kind of say, okay, you'll have the central threat, and maybe that threat will kind of be an ongoing cast. It doesn't even have to be one person, but it's not going to be so much where that's the only thing you think of. And really, that's kind of the case with any game, any even like movie. There's the villains, and then sometimes there's like the side villains, or like, not the main, not the main antagonist, but like the step below. And that's, that keeps the story going. It keeps it from being like a 1 hour thing in a movie, or like a 5-6 hour thing in a game when they want it to be like 30. Okay, so the Court of Owls I do think will be very important. I think it'll have to do with the zones of this game, right? In terms of like maybe there'll be a Talon. We've seen rumors, or we've seen people even talk about maybe a Talon will protect each individual spot. Maybe you have to defeat them. Maybe that's how you unlock it. They could do a lot. You could get skill points. You could get all sorts of, especially the way they're doing the combat now and all that leveling up stuff. We'll have to see how they connect everything together. But obviously, the Court of Owls will be important in even just honestly populating the game and keeping you doing things like throughout it. But also the main story, whatever the main quest line is, whatever you're trying to do, however menacing they may be, they will be the main villain. But again, how much, I truly do not think it'll be in your face nonstop 100% of the time. I really feel like they will take back seats to the story somewhat often. And so the question is, okay, well, you have a main game and you have a main story that focuses on the Court of Owls. Is that enough? I guess in two different ways. One for us and one for Warner Bros. Montreal, where it's like, do they feel content where it's like, okay, we had Beware of the Court of Owls. Like that was so popular. So many people were into that. Again, like online, the online community. So many people were into that. They got to tell the story. They did something that wasn't really done before. They can get a pat on the back for them. I mean, you could definitely give them a lot of accolades for that, right? Like, congrats. But do they feel like that's enough? Do they say, okay, well, we did it. We introduced a new villain. Next game, we're gonna do another new villain that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of yet. Okay, because we don't want to kind of stick with the same thing. Do they do that, or do they say, no, you know what? We kind of want to really take this, like, we want to introduce them here. They're gonna be menacing, but these are like, maybe we're planning a trilogy, and this is like the main threat for the entire like these guys. This is just the beginning of how bad it's going to get. It's going to get more difficult, and it's going to get worse in future games. Okay, now again, does that mean you can't defeat them in this game? Of course, I think you can defeat them. I don't think that doesn't mean. I think you absolutely can defeat them, and then maybe they can come back in a second game stronger. I guess the basic thing is, unless they do a Joker thing with Arkham City to Arkham Knight, which, by the way, I mean, even Rocksteady couldn't fully go along with it, if you notice. I was going to say, unless they kill people off, like very, particularly they take people out, so you could say, okay, they cannot be in future stuff. The thing with a comic book or a superhero kind of game like this is you can keep bringing them. I mean, they can get arrested, they can be knocked out, but they can, they'll always come back. They'll always find a way of coming back. That is what kind of makes it special, and then they can decide later if they ever want to bring them back. But with the Court of Owls, I don't know, they're so big that it's one, or I feel like it's one or the other. Obviously, there are only two choices where they say, okay, we did our job, we took them out, we really have no plans to continue them in future games. Or they say, again, like, this was the start, we have a lot of plans for the future. You will defeat them, you will have a happy ending, but you will have to deal with them later. And I feel like, to answer my question for this video, it is actually pretty darn difficult, unless obviously we know the ending of of Gotham Knights, or we know what their plan is for the future. Now, we know they're making a second game. What could that second game be? Will there be more game? And now they have given us a little info, right? There were a lot of outlets that said, well, are you going to, like, is there going to be more games in the future in the Gotham Knights world? They were very, open with it, like, where they weren't going to give very specific answers. But I think the answer is yes. I think that you don't create a world like this to just leave it behind after one game. That's pretty much the case with any of this stuff. So I absolutely do think the potential is there to make more Gotham Knights games, maybe swap them out, maybe, do a lot of different stuff with different villains, all that. So again, do you keep the Court of Owls around? I think you do. I don't think you permanently so that's my answer. I don't think you permanently get rid of the Court of Owls in this game. I think you can defeat them. Again, oddball choice would be that you do not defeat them and there's still a menace. Really, again, I know it's not, particularly, a part of this video, but I would like to see that. Again, I get there's so much situations where you're not guaranteed more games, but I mean, a game that ends where, like, you do not win. Now, maybe there are. I mean, I think, like, Resistance 2 is probably a good example of that, right? And where they ended it, and it's like, what in God's name did you just do? I'm sure even if I thought about it for even a couple of seconds off camera, I could probably think of something. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments, but bottom line is I don't think it's very common. Okay, I don't think it's common that stuff happens where it would ends on like oh my God, well, they have to make a sequel, and if they don't, well, now the first game just looks bad. It's not often, and particularly, it's not often with a game like this. I mean, I guess if you didn't continue it after City, would that have been okay? I think it would have, because you kind of wrapped it up, again, pretty darn well. A lot of games are, again, designed for that specific game where they don't necessarily need a sequel to make it all work, where sometimes movies, the directors, or for whatever reason, by the way, they like expect that, I need to make 18 films of this in order for it to eventually work, but just, let me do it, because if you don't, none of this is going to make sense. Well, obviously, that's a problem, and I guess I understand why games don't do that. But guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Do you think the Court of Owls will stick around after this game? Do you think they'll be defeated, maybe brought back, or do you think they'll be permanently wiped off the face of the earth in Gotham Knights? Let me know what you guys think. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed to this YouTube channel, Podcast Now. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when all these videos go up. And I know the dates are off this week on Gotham Knights. I'm going to do another video on Saturday. So today's Thursday, you guys are seeing this. Saturday is the next one. And then we'll get back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week, okay? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.